Chapter 25. Sunday started off as a quiet day. No basketball practice or Chinese school. No one fell down the stairs. Kenny went out with some friends. Mom and Yipo had tea in the kitchen while I watched TV. Dad sat in the dining room and read the paper. Suddenly, Dad came charging out of the dining room. "Do you know where Kenneth is?" he demanded. This was not good. Dad never said Kenneth. "No," said Mom. "What's wrong, Steve? Has something happened?" Dad pointed at a paper. On the front of the paper there was a photograph of a group of high school students. The caption read, "Roosevelt High School Math Whiz Team moves on to Regionals." Kenny was nowhere in the picture. "Maybe Kenny just missed the day they were taking the pictures," I said hopefully. "Maybe," said Dad grimly. Mom shook her head. I closed my eyes and tried to send Kenny a telepathic message. "Kenny, stay away." Kenny didn't get my message. No one ever does. Right as Mom was bringing dinner to the table, Kenny came in. "Hey guys, what's up? Sorry I'm late. Lost track of time." "You are in trouble," I said to Kenny under my breath. "There was a picture of the Math Whiz team in the paper and you weren't in it." "Oh boy." Kenny shrugged. Kenny's shoulders sagged, deflating. "I was afraid something like this might happen." "So you..." I stopped when Mom came in and saw Kenny. "Hi, Mom," Kenny said weakly. "Can I help you with anything?" "Everything's taken care of," said Mom, frowning. "Lucy, call your dad and Yipo. When my parents get mad, they don't get mad in the same way. My mom gets very cold and unemotional, while my dad turns red and raises his voice." Mom slid the newspaper across the table. I'd like you to explain this, Kenneth." Dad leaned over and stabbed the paper with his finger. "And you'd better have a good explanation." They both stared at Kenny. Kenny stared at his plate. "Did you miss the day of the photograph?" asked Mom. Kenny shook his head. "I'm not on the Math Whiz team anymore." But, Dad scrambled for the right words. "Your dream! Math Whiz was your ticket to a good engineering school." My parents were always talking about Kenny becoming an engineer, like my mom, and what amazing school he would go to. They would recite names like a Buddhist chant, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, Harvey Mudd. Kenny's voice was small but clear. "It's not my dream. I'm not sure it ever was. I'll keep taking the upper-level classes at school, but I'm not doing the Math Whiz anymore." "You have a gift," said Dad at the same time. Mom said, "What will you do now?" "I want," said Kenny, "to study history." I could swear that I heard a whooshing sound in the room as both my parents inhaled at the same time. They had been fine with Regina being a Chinese studies major, but she didn't have a gift for math like Kenny. In Chinese families, kids with math talents like Kenny don't become historians. They become doctors or engineers. It's practically a law. "No," said Dad. "I'm not paying for you to go to college to study history." Kenny didn't say anything, but I thought, you can't force someone to become something they don't want to be, can you? After Mom and Dad's fight with Kenny, I wasn't sure we were going to have this family get-together after the dinner. We usually had one on Sundays, but as we were clearing dishes, I saw Mom carrying the big green box into the living room, which meant we were definitely going to have one. Some people use the word scrapbook as a verb. I'm scrapbooking tonight. For Mom, though, the word's just completely foreign. All of our family photos, all of our school pictures, any pictures that someone might have sent us, went into what we called the big green box, a large dark green box that I think once held a pair of boots. Need a photo for a school project? Go get the big green box. Want to know what you looked like 5 years ago? Look in the big green box. While no more people sat around and looked in scrapbooks that might be organized chronologically, My family sat around the box, pulled random photos out, and tried to figure out what they were and where they were from. "We're looking through the big green box tonight, huh?" I asked Mom. Mom nodded. "I thought Yipo might like to see some photos before she goes, and we can make copies of any picture she would like." This ought to be good. I could just see us plowing through haphazard piles of photos, looking for anything decent for Yipo. Me. "This is Regina batting a piñata from her 4th birthday party." Mom. Here's Kenny's 2nd grade soccer team that he quit halfway through." Dad. "This is Lucy when she was missing her 2 front teeth." Yipo, in Chinese. "You guys ever heard of a scrapbook?" In reality, though, Yipo didn't seem to mind looking at odd photographs of me riding a bike or even Christmas photos from neighbors who had moved away. She paid particular attention to pictures of Popo from birthday parties and holidays. She smiled at each one, then set it aside so it wouldn't go back into the mysterious depths of the big green box. Kenny pulled out one and started laughing hysterically. We all leaned over to see what he had found. Dad tried to yank it out of his hand, but Kenny held it away. It was a picture of a college student, wearing sandals, jeans, and fringed jacket. He had on sunglasses and was carrying a guitar. His long black hair was pulled back into a ponytail. I realized that was Dad. He was smoking. "Dad, is that you?" I asked. Kenny was laughing so hard he could hardly breathe. "You look like a Chinese John Lennon." Dad straightened his neck, trying to look dignified. "I guess some photos from your grandmother's house got mixed up in here," he said stiffly. It was a brief stage I went through in college. Dad plunged his hand into the big green box and yanked out another photo. "Look what I found," he said with a note of forced enthusiasm in his voice. "A really old one." We all turned to look at the small black and white photo of a woman and a young girl stood on the deck of a ship with the Statue of Liberty in the background. They were both squinting at the camera. I stared at the photograph. I had seen this picture before and just assumed it was from my family we didn't know. "Look at those clothes," Mom murmured Mom. "They don't dress like that anymore." The woman was wearing a dress, white gloves, and a hat. The little girl was also wearing white gloves and carrying a little purse. "That girl looks like you, Lucy," said Kenny, "when you were her age." I looked harder, but I couldn't see the resemblance. Yipo reached down and gently plucked the photo from Dad's hand. "I thought I'd never see this picture again," she breathed. For a second, she sounded so calm that I thought I had misunderstood. But my parents and Kenny looked just as startled as I felt. Slowly, Yipo told us of the story of the photograph. My parents translated, and Kenny explained, until I had a whole story in my head, pumping through my veins and swirling in my heart, until her story became my story, too. It was a year after the Cultural Revolution began, when Chairman Mao began the Four Olds campaign. I was a young woman then. We were told, "Get rid of your 4 olds, old culture, old habits, old customs, and old ideas. Bring China into the future." Bands of Red Guards roamed the streets, entering homes and looking for evidence of 4 olds. After a while, we started to recognize the sound of their terrorizing, the banging, the smashing, the screaming. Many times people were dragged out of their homes for a struggle session, where neighbors would be forced to watch Red Guards beat, torture, and humiliate their victims. One day, we saw our neighbor, Old Zhu, lying on the ground. He had been kicked and pummeled by the Red Guards. We later found out he had been punished for trying to hide his single postage stamp from the United States. It was forbidden because it showed that he admired Western objects. He almost died from his injuries. Then my aunt heard that we might be next. Perhaps because my family had once been landowners, it was hard to know. Anyone who had once had money or who had an education was under suspicion. We looked quickly through our belongings, examining each one for any quality that might make it for old. I did not think we would have anything that would displease the Red Guards. We just did not have that much. But then my aunt seized upon our photo album. "Hurry, look!" I remember her hands shaking as she leafed through the album. We tore out old photos of older relatives, anyone who was in fancy or Western dress. I felt though we were suffering their deaths once more as we ripped out their pictures. We would never see their faces again. She turned the page. There was a photograph, a duplicate of the photograph you have there. It was the only photograph I had of my mother and my sister. How many times had I looked longingly at that picture? "This one too," said Auntie firmly, and she grabbed a corner and started to pull. "Please, no," I begged. I grabbed her arm. She shook her head. "We must." She continued to rip out the photograph. I felt as if my heart were torn out with the picture. "It's my only photograph of my mother and sister. Please, I'll hide it. I know I can hide it where they will never find it." Of course, I didn't know where I would hide it, but I had to try. My aunt turned and glared at me. "You ingrate," she hissed. "All these years I've cared for you as one of my own. Where were your mother and sister when you needed them? And now you want to risk this paper family for your real family. How dare you?" In that split second, I thought I saw something else in her eyes. Not fear, a look of calculation, perhaps. Jealousy? Not for the first time. I wondered if she was jealous of the love I still had for my parents and my sister. Not for the first time. I wondered if she knew what had happened to them. But then I hung my head. How could I be so ungrateful? "Remember old Zoo," she cried shrilly. I held out my hand. "Give it to me. You are right. Please, just let me take care of them." The Red Guards often searched through the rubbish bins, so we couldn't simply throw away the photographs. We had to burn them. I shut the bathroom door and burned the photographs one by one. I saved that photograph for last. I held the picture and stared at it, trying to memorize every last detail. The look in their eyes, the patterns on their dresses, their hair. Then I held it to my chest. "Forgive me," I whispered. Then I watched the photo curl and burn until there was nothing left but black ash. The Red Guards did come. I found out later that a friend of mine had accused us of being counter-revolutionary, to protect her own family, and that was what had provoked the attack. It was such a terrible time. Truth, loyalty, honor meant nothing. The whole order of our society had been turned upside down. I watched them ransack my home, tearing apart beds, tossing drawers on the floor, and going through trunks. They seemed to delight in throwing our belongings around, stepping them carelessly. I don't think I could have hidden that photograph. They were so thorough. But I did not flinch. I did not cry. They could not hurt any more. When she finished telling her story, we were all quiet for a moment. Kenny looked at my parents for a long time. For the longest time, China had seemed like a separate place, the hyphenated place in my life. Chinese American. But now China was close, because that's where Yipo was from. She had lost so much, her family, her history, even her friends. How did she ever manage to smile or feel happy again? I thought about the way she looked when she brought me the basketball hoop and backboard. Could I go through something so awful and then care about making another person happy? Kan Ki Lai, get up. You had to get up again. I leaned against her, trying to give her the support my words could not provide. I wondered what my grandmother would have thought. I think she would have been proud to have Yipo as her sister. If she could be that brave, maybe I could too.